Oh, thank you, Claire, for that really wonderful way to start the session this evening. I'm definitely going to take that away as an idea to try out at my church. Thanks for the invitation to join you today, and thank you to everybody for coming. As Claire said, I'm Polly, and I'm the Growing Good project manager at the Church Urban Fund. I'll just explain a little bit about how the rest of the evening is going to proceed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Growing Good Toolkit, which is a resource from the Church Urban Fund. I'll talk about the background to the toolkit. And then we'll have a time for discussion. We'll go back into slightly bigger breakout groups. I've got some questions for us to discuss. And then we'll hear from two churches from the diocese who've used the Growing Good Toolkit. And then finally, we'll have a time for sort of Q&A and any final reflections. If you have questions that occur to you as I'm talking or over the next 45 minutes or so, please put them in the chat and we can pick them up when we come to that final Q&A session, or just bring them at the end, and there'll be time to address those then. And also just to say as we start that if after this session you've got further questions or you want to think a bit more about how you could use the Growing Good Toolkit with your church or your group, then I'm really happy to arrange one-to-one conversations with people, and we'll make sure that Claire shares my contact details after this evening, along with the video recording. And I'd be really delighted to hear from you by email, or we can have a phone conversation or a video chat and talk a bit more about how you can use the toolkit in your church or with your group. So Claire, if you can share, I think we'll go straight to the second slide. We'll get going and I will tell you about the Growing Good Toolkit. So the Growing Good Toolkit is a free 6-session course from the Church Urban Fund. It's based on 3 years of research into what enables churches to flourish and develop connections with their wider community. It helps churches to grow in knowledge about their congregation and their wider community. It helps churches grow in confidence in their local mission, and it helps churches to grow in relationships and hospitality. It's a flexible and adaptable course. Rather than being prescriptive, it provides a framework for conversations about your individual context. And the sessions include a mixture of content, including videos, activities, and discussion, to encourage everyone in the group to contribute. There we go. The Growing Good Toolkit helps churches acknowledge and celebrate what they're already doing, as well as generating ideas for new activities. And it's been really great to speak to churches that have used the toolkit and to hear that it has really encouraged them. It hasn't made them feel like they should be doing more or they should be doing different things. It's actually encouraged them in what they're already doing, as well as helping them think about taking next steps. So if we go on to the next slide, the Growing Good Toolkit grew out of a piece of research from Church Urban Fund and Theos, the Christian think tank. And the research project started in 2017 and was called GRACE. And some of you may have heard about it. Some of you may have participated in it. And GRACE stood for Growth, Relationships and Action in the Church of England. And the researchers set out to explore how social action, discipleship, and growth fit together, and to identify any key factors that are observed when the link between social action, discipleship, and growth is seen. And just to say that when we're talking growth in relation to the Growing Good Toolkit and the GRACE research, we're talking about growth that encompasses quantitative growth, so growth in numerical participation on Sundays and through the week, and numerical growth in connections with the wider community, And we're also talking about qualitative growth. So we're talking about depth of faith, maturity, growth in diversity, growth in relationships, and growth in service. So I want us to keep that in mind as we go through this session this evening, that we're talking about holistic growth. So growth that encompasses quantitative growth and qualitative growth as well. So the research project took 3 years, and the research team conducted over 300 interviews across more than 60 parishes in every diocese in England. And they interviewed lay people, clergy, and participants in social action projects. And they heard from churches of different sizes and different contexts. For example, a third of the churches who took part in the research were in rural areas. The research report was published in 2020, about 6 months into the pandemic. And you can find it in full on the Growing Good website. It includes some really good case studies, as well as some analysis and some reflection. And we recently had a session with Hannah Rich, who was the lead researcher on the project. And she said that even though the report is now about 4 years old, she thinks that it's still relevant today as well. So crucially, the report highlighted that when it comes to this connection between discipleship and social action, or community engagement and growth, it's not necessarily what we're doing, but it's the way in which we're doing it that's critical. And when they looked at this kind of aspect of culture, church culture, the way in which we do things, they identified 5 key characteristics that were shared amongst churches in the research that are growing holistically and are flourishing through their engagement with their community. And these characteristics are presence, perseverance, hospitality and generosity, adaptability, and participation. And I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about each of these in turn, because they're quite important, and they also form the basis for the Growing Good Toolkit. So starting with presence, so the research found that the church grows in number and in depth when it's present, visible, and connected to its local area. And of course, we're not just talking about the physical presence of the church through its buildings. We also mean the presence of church members through networks of relationships, through their presence within the community, through the church's online presence, and that's increasingly becoming a factor, and also through the church's engagement in social action and community transformation. Perseverance is closely linked to presence, and that's about long-term engagement and focused activity within in the community and with the community. It's about investing in people and institutions over the long term, even when it's hard and slow and challenging. And it's also about reflecting on Christian discipleship as a lifelong journey. The third characteristic, or characteristics, are hospitality and generosity. And the research found that hospitality and generosity are significant for church growth, especially where they communicate a genuine willingness to engage with and invest in the community as it is, and where the church is willing to model the example of Jesus in receiving hospitality from others, as well as offering it. Adaptability is also about meeting the community as it is. It's about being adaptable and embracing life's complexities. It's about being open to challenge and change. And it's about learning how to integrate people of different ages, cultures, and backgrounds into the life of the church. And finally, participation. The research found that churches that encourage participation in social action, in community engagement, also offer a practical route into faith for people who weren't previously part of the church's community and who might not have considered exploring faith before. It's about a culture of inviting everyone to be part of what's going on. So COF developed the Growing Good Toolkit to help churches reflect on these 5 themes. The 5 sessions of the Growing Good Toolkit look at each of these 5 themes, and then there's a final 6th next step session to bring everything together. And we're going to watch a very short film now. It's a trailer. It introduces you to the 2 presenters who present all the Growing Good films, Bishop Lynn Collins and Reverend Lauren Simpson. You'll see a few snippets from some of the case study films that are part of the Growing Good Toolkit, and it gives you a good short introduction to the toolkit resource. Is that ready to go, Claire?
Yep.
We did have some issues with the film earlier. It's slightly glitchy when we show it via Zoom, but I promise you that when you watch it offline, it plays really well.
Okay, a little prayer now. Give me a wave, Polly, if you can hear it.
We all want our churches to grow, to be places where people of all backgrounds can belong, contribute, and encounter Jesus, no matter where they are on their faith journey. And we all want communities of joy, justice, and right relationships where the work of the Holy Spirit is evident. But how do we make that happen?
The Growing Good Toolkit is designed to help churches connect the dots between social action, discipleship, and growth. Through flexible, interactive small group sessions, we will explore how our churches can be faithful and fruitful in our local communities. The Growing Good Toolkit is based on 3 years of research by Theos and Church Urban Fund. We've learned from over 60 churches, big and small, urban and rural, in areas of affluence and in low-income communities, and in everything in between.
As we journey through the toolkit, we will hear from Scripture, as well as research and stories from churches all across England. In our small groups, we'll learn from each other and consider what God might be calling us to do together. And we will pray, seeking God's wisdom and blessing.
God is at work transforming people and places. He's inviting us to be part of his story of transformation. Will you join us in Growing Good?
Great. So if you go on to the next slide, Claire, great. Okay, so as I said, there are 6 sessions in the toolkit. The first 5 look at each of those 5 themes, and then the 6th session brings everything together. It's called the next step session. I'm going to give a brief overview of the session format here, and we're going to look at the session guide for the session on hospitality, but all the sessions follow the same format. Each session lasts about 90 minutes, and each session starts with an opening question to get people thinking about the theme. Then there's a scripture reading with some context, followed by some discussion questions, then a case study film, an activity or further discussion to bring it all together, a closing prayer, and then a suggested takeaway action. So just to sort of bring that to life for you using the example of the session on hospitality, the opening question for this session asks people to reflect on a positive experience of hospitality. And then the Bible reading is from Luke 14, where Jesus uses the context of a meal to tell a parable that challenges people to think about their motives for offering hospitality. And then the questions after the Bible reading explore this a little bit further, asking whether sometimes the hospitality that we offer as a church might be inconsistent or might be one-sided. Are we always the ones offering hospitality and never the ones receiving hospitality? And then the group would move on to the case study film. In this case, it's a film from a church in Kent. that has a cafe and a free place of welcome or a warm space. In their case, offering hospitality has become a way for people in the community to find a place to belong, to find a purpose, and to find a way to contribute to the wider community. Following the film, there's either an activity or some further discussion questions. And that's about bringing together people's own experience, their reflections on the Bible reading for that session, and the content of the film. And it's an opportunity to think more practically as a church about how you might want to put some of the things that you've discussed into action. And then the session ends with a time of prayer. We provide a suggested prayer, but obviously some groups might want to extend that into a longer time of prayer, or if it's in a home group or small group setting where they have a kind of tradition of praying together as part of their meeting, then that could be incorporated there. And then we always provide a takeaway action. Some people call it homework. In this case, it's very simply to ask people to go away and during the week to give or receive hospitality by having a cup of tea or coffee with somebody. So the next steps are always very simple and straightforward and inclusive. So all the course materials, the 6 session guides and the films and links to other useful resources are all available online on the Growing Good website. And we just ask people to sign up the first time to access the material. We ask you to give us a little bit of information, including your email address, the name of the church that you're linked to, and your denomination and postcode as well. But other than that, the material is free to use and free to access. Claire, can you go on to the next slide? Thank you. So we launched the Growing Good Toolkit just over 2 years ago. And over that time, we've had feedback from groups and churches that have used the toolkit. And we've reflected some of that feedback in updates that we've made to the material and to the resources. So we've recently launched a new training hub for group leaders. That's got lots of short videos covering all aspects of the course material, including how to prepare for a session and top tips from churches that have used the course. So the idea of the training hub is that it really gives you kind of a step-by-step guide to using the resources. And the other significant new content that we've recently added are 3 new films that reflect more variety in terms of church context and resources. So we filmed a church on an estate in East London that doesn't have a building and has had to be quite creative to adapt to that. They're also really committed to developing leadership from the local community. So that links in with our theme of participation. We then filmed a church in South Manchester. The church leader there describes the church as either really small or really huge, depending on how you look at it. They are a congregation of 15 people, but they have partnerships with about 20 different organisations that are offering support and services to people in the community to promote health and well-being. And then finally, we spent an excellent day in Goathurst in the Quantock benefice with Reverend Eleanor King and the team there. And there we were exploring some of the challenges and opportunities of rural ministry. And it's really great to have Reverend Eleanor here with us this evening. And we're going to chat a bit later on about their experience of using the toolkit. So our hope for these 3 new films is that they enable more churches to see their context reflected in the Growing Good Toolkit. And we also hope to continue to update and develop new content for the toolkit as we go along. And we're also really keen to hear feedback from churches that have used the toolkit. So if you have used it or you do use it, please get in touch and let us know what you thought. Before we move back into groups for a bit more of a time of discussion, just wanted to share with you the impact of the toolkit on churches that have used it over the last 2 years. So Claire, can you go on to the next slide? Great. So we recently commissioned an evaluation, and the evaluator spoke to a number of churches that have used the toolkit in the last 2 years. And they told us that the content and the material is straightforward to use, easy to deliver, the sessions are a good length, the layouts are easy to follow, and the sessions are flexible and adaptable. So that was great for us because that's what we had intended when we designed the course. If we go on to the next slide, we then asked churches about the impact that it had had on their church. And we heard 3 things or 3 themes that emerged. So we heard that the toolkit is helping churches grow in knowledge about their community. And I would actually add it was helping them grow in knowledge about their congregation as well. And that was particularly through the presence and perseverance sessions, which helped churches to find out more about the lives of people in their community, what the needs and opportunities were in their community, and how they could engage more with the individuals and institutions in their community. And it also helped them get to know about the gifts and the skills in their congregation. We then heard that it was helping churches grow in confidence in local mission. And that was particularly through the biblical reflections, the films, and the group exercises that were giving churches a fresh vision that was theologically rooted, and that the films were inspiring new missional ideas. There was a vicar in East Sussex who told us that the course gave those who did it greater confidence to be salt and light and to make a difference in the community. And then thirdly, we heard that the toolkit was helping churches grow in hospitality and relationships. So using the toolkit has prompted churches to take active steps to initiate new connections and to cultivate local relationships. And some of the ideas or some of the actions that we heard churches had taken included opening up their church building, finding new opportunities to share food together, partnering with local schools and other local institutions, and being more open to receiving the hospitality of others, as well as offering hospitality. And then if we go to the next slide, all of this has led to some churches taking further practical steps as a result of using the toolkit. So we've heard about churches tidying up their church grounds, improving the signage, adding a bench outside so people can stop and sit and chat or be quiet in the church grounds, opening the church doors, having their coffee and tea after a service outside, going on prayer walks, joining local Facebook groups, and then hosting or participating in outdoor community celebrations. When it comes to adapting, churches have sometimes invited volunteers to be part of a special celebration service that celebrates local social action. They've added songs for children, or songs in different languages, or simplified the language that they've used in services to be more inclusive. And some churches have started new projects. So, for example, the evaluation report highlights a church that started a monthly pop-up cafe, which is free for people to come and attend. So overall, our recent evaluation found that churches that have used the Growing Good Toolkit are growing in knowledge, confidence, and connection, and that this is generating stepping stones that can lead to spiritual and numerical growth. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the toolkit, and there will be time for questions at the end, but I just wanted to have a break, give you a break from listening to me, and have another opportunity to talk to one another in slightly bigger groups. And we've got a couple of questions for you just to think about for the next 5 5 minutes or so. And the questions are, and we can probably put these in the chat, otherwise they're going to be quite hard to remember. So the questions are: the Growing Good Toolkit is based on research that found that churches that were engaging with their community through social action are more likely to be growing in faith, depth, number of connections, and maturity. What does that mean for you in your context? Where have you seen that at work? And then secondly, thinking of the 5 Growing Good themes: presence, perseverance, hospitality, adaptability, and participation. Which of these has your church found it easiest to develop? And which of those are more challenging? And do you have examples? So we'll spend, I think we've got about 5 minutes now for this. So you might want to choose just one of those questions, and I will try and put them in the chat. Hopefully you'll be able to see them. So we can go into breakout rooms now. So first of all, we're going to hear from Reverend Eleanor King from the Quantock Benefice. Is that right, Eleanor?
Yeah, Quantock Villages Benefice.
Quantock
I
Villages.
couldn't fit it all in.
Great. So so Eleanor, we've met before because, as I said, we did some filming with you earlier in the year, and we'll share the link to that film after this session. So first of all, just tell us where you're from, a little bit about the context of the church in which you use the toolkit.
Yeah, I look after some churches in the Quantocks, sort of Nether Stowey through to Bridgewater. So it's a group of rural churches. Maximum congregation of one of the churches is about 40, and some of the other churches are quite small. We use the Growing Good Toolkit in one of the churches over Stowey, which is really on the Quantocks. It's the whole village has about 345 people in about 150 households. So it really is a rural community. It has a village hall and nothing else. It had a coffee shop at the time when we started the Growing Good Toolkit. It was a church warden who'd spotted it in December 2021, and early in January 2022, we took on meeting in somebody's house every couple of weeks to go through the 5-6 sessions. The church warden very much lay. We'd meet in this house. It would be facilitated by anybody. It wasn't necessarily me or one of the other priests. Sometimes lay took it on, and the real sense of just sharing. Obviously, putting it in context, we were coming out of COVID. It was great to be meeting in someone's house. Yeah, it's really good.
And how many people in the group?
It was the sort of 8 members of the PTC there and thereabouts.
And you said, yeah, sorry. And you said that different people took it in turns to lead. And did you find that the material was easy to use?
There were no complaints.
Okay, great.
And somebody kindly actually made a few notes after each of the sessions. So we'd go back and review the previous session, and then, so yeah, no, it was lovely, and it was lovely to enable lay as well.
Yeah, great. That's good to hear. And what would you say were the most significant insights for the group at the time?
I think the fact that we could all share and be part of what was being discussed, lay and priests. We were working together. It was really quite enabling in that sense. I think one of the challenges, and you know this, is that we got a little bit challenged by them all being urban contexts. So one of the ongoing things from that, I was on the verge of saying, well, hang on a minute, where does this participation or presence, where do we see that in a rural context? So it's great to have worked with you to look at Goathurst.
Yeah, No, it's great to have now that representation of a really rural context. Were there any of the themes that particularly stood out to the group? Or were there any that were more challenging? I mean, you've mentioned, you know, sometimes the context in the films weren't as relatable, but were there any of the themes that stood out for your group?
I think one is very much presence. Where do the people meet in the community? Where can we go and be? One of the big things that came out is there's a community of dog walkers that obviously moves around, but there's so many people in that community that actually have dogs and walk them.
Yeah.
And how many conversations happen as people walk. How can we turn that into something? Yeah. I think the other big one for us is the church would run a quarterly coffee morning in the village hall next door. That's now become a monthly coffee morning, alternating with the village hall. So that sense of giving hospitality and receiving.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're having to put out an extra table every time now.
Right. That's exciting.
It's taken time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's been really good.
And then one of the things that you said to me, and actually came up in the breakout groups just now, was that you actually, at the end of the 6 sessions, the group put together an action plan, and that 18 months, 2 years on, that's still a live document and something that's being worked on. Can you say a bit about that?
Yeah, well, one of the things that came out was we also looked at our welcome. We've readdressed the welcome corner has been looked at. There are now more leaflets about what visitors can pop in and see in church. Being in the Quantocks, it's walkers' paradise in a way. Mm-hmm. So people do walk in. So there's a lot more of that. We are looking at things like sort of reigniting faith within the church. Conversations have happened along the lines of, why do we do this in church? What does this mean? It's really opened up the conversation. So that's good. But that's an ongoing action plan.
Yeah,
that I would say probably has changed a bit in 2 years, but
yeah,
you know, that's keeping going, and we're enhancing as it goes. So it's good to be doing that. That's
great. Oh, thank you. Is there anything else? We're going to move on to speak to Tim Erridge in a minute, but was there anything else, Eleanor, that you wanted to share about your experiences of using the toolkit?
I think it's usable by lay. It encourages us to do things, as you say. You know, you've got that task, that homework at the end of the you know, that might not be appropriate to your context, but we tended to try and find something that was appropriate to our context.
Right.
It became very much a living experience, but I think one of the big thing is that everybody took part.
Right.
So thank you.
Thank you. That's great to hear. So we're now going to hear from Reverend Tim Erridge, who I've not met before. Hi. Hi, Tim. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being part of this.
That's okay.
So can you just tell us a little bit about where you're from and when and how you use the Growing Good Toolkit?
So I'm the vicar at Bourneville, which is a parish in the southern part of Weston-super-Mare, predominantly social housing. So I love the way there's a complete contrast in this in the context we've just talked about. So we started using Growing Good, we must, in the dates you gave earlier, I hadn't realized quite how early on we must have been, because we started using it would have been autumn 22.
Right.
I think one thing I need to say about the context of the church is we're not a church that naturally does courses.
Mm-hmm.
We're a church where you know, a lot of people don't have a lot of professional experience and you know, are good at getting together.
Yeah.
And ideas come following structures. Well, if I'm really honest with you, we probably took quite a few liberties with the resources and adapted. We made them our own in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
I suppose maybe I don't know whether this is ever something you intended, but actually what we did with it was we used the themes as Sunday morning themes.
Yeah.
Rather than in a small group. And we took one of the themes each month. So yeah, and we didn't feel we had to do everything. I think for a lot of the folks, just for our context, there's a lot of resource there, and so we picked the bits that felt they connected for us, and probably, in fact, and it's been really interesting coming tonight because I think in some ways, I'm not sure we did it justice, and actually, even already tonight in some of the small group stuff, I've realised things that have come out of it that I hadn't seen before. So that sense of how we followed it, how we didn't follow it up enough. You know,
Right.
there are things I'd do differently if I did it again.
Right.
But no, it's good in all sorts of ways.
And so absolutely the way that you used it is, we have heard of other churches that have done that have taken the 5 themes, perhaps the Bible readings and films, and have built a series of Sunday services around that, or picked 1 or 2. And yeah, certainly that's something that we're looking at in terms of how we can do more to enable and facilitate that, because that works really well for some churches. And also, as you say, although we've designed the sessions to be as easy to use as possible, for some groups it will be appropriate that there's more work needed to kind of adapt and translate the material for the particular group and the group members. But the whole point, as I said early on, is that it's a framework for conversations about your context, and so hopefully that's what comes across. In terms of the session, in terms of the themes of the sessions, presence, participation, etc., were there any that felt more appropriate or significant for your group, or any that were very challenging for the group?
I think probably the one that resonated most was actually around perseverance.
Right.
And some of that was about acknowledge. I think some of that was about, oh gosh, it's not just us few. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it in general, I would say, I don't know how this sounds. I'm not sure there's much that's new that's come out of it, but I think there's quite a lot of affirmation of what already is.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, just even in the conversations tonight, me seeing the value of that in a way that I hadn't quite seen without this conversation has made me review sort of where are we now, having used the materials, and to some extent thinking, oh gosh, I didn't really do a desperately good job of delivering that. And actually, I think there's more come out of it than I realized. So yeah.
And I think that's what,
and I suppose it's because quite a lot of what comes out of things like this isn't the things I find, it's not the things I expect it to be, and therefore there's a danger that I don't notice it because I'm looking for the thing I expect, and when that doesn't happen, I thought,
right, yeah, yeah.
But actually, it's, you know, take that time to look a bit more, isn't it?
Yeah. And in terms of your point about it affirming and encouraging, and that's what we've heard a lot, that it's churches have said, oh, we realize that we're doing more than we thought, or what we're doing is having more of a making more of a difference, or having more of an impact. And I think that feeds into that finding about confidence in mission, and it's actually acknowledging and being aware and naming what we're already doing and being encouraged in that. So yeah, that's certainly a common theme we've heard from churches that have used the material. And I mean, has the toolkit using it resulted in any activity?
I'd have to say, I think there's the thing that comes to mind most, and there's something here I want to show you, and probably it's to do with prayer.
Right.
Because this, you'll probably recognize some of this, but not in this format.
No.
And so again, this is probably to do with us taking liberties with the resources in a way, but we created this single A4 sheet from the prayer resources. And this, I know that various people ran with this, in that it was picked up and used by groups who told me afterwards they were doing it as opening prayers for little groups who were getting together to plan something, or all those sorts of things. So in terms of, I mean, they would pray, it helped them to pray. Yes, they would always pray anyway, but there was something about this was the bit that people took in their hands. And that, again, that's not a way of engaging that I necessarily expected to be a primary thing that came out of it, but it did. And as I say, I think because of the character of the community, to be able in some ways to create something which it's great to have the extent of the bank of the resources, but something which trims it right down to say, oh right, I can see a bit of what this is about. I think that was really valuable for us.
Great. Oh, thank you for sharing that. And we've just recently updated that little prayer. So that's within the kind of additional resources section on the website. A lot of those original prayers were quite heavily pandemic focused.
Yes.
So we've recently updated that and taken out a lot of those references and made it a bit more contemporary as well. But that's really encouraging to me to hear that that was something that was helpful for your group. So thank you, Tim, and thank you, Eleanor, for your feedback.
Thank you.
So we're getting towards the end of the evening. We're going to have a time for questions in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to very quickly share with you just how you can sign up to access the materials. So Claire, have you got those slides there again? Sorry, we're jumping around a bit. So if we go, I think it'll be there a bit further down. Bit further. Yeah. So sorry, that's the one. Yeah. So just to say, the toolkit was designed as a 6-session course, but actually each of the 5 themed sessions can also stand alone. So if you felt like one of those themes was particularly relevant for your church or your group, you could just use it as a one-off. The sessions were designed to use with small groups or house groups, but as we've heard, some churches have taken the themes and some of the material and used it as content for Sunday services or a series of Sunday services. And we also know that in some places, groups of churches or teams or deanery groups have got together and used the material as part of a group or a team of churches. We also know of a number of churches that have used the toolkit material to help kickstart their mission action planning, and particularly as a way of involving more people in mission action planning rather than just the church leadership or the PCC. And then other churches that have used the Growing Good Toolkit with their leadership team, with their PCC, or with specific groups of volunteers. So there was a church in Stockport who were starting a new weekly free hot meal service for the community. And they got the volunteers for that project together, and they did the hospitality session together as a way of beginning to set a shared culture around hospitality that then would lead into the way in which they delivered and ran that weekly hot meal service. So there's lots of different ways that churches have been adapting and using the toolkit material, and we're just really pleased when we hear that that's happening, and we're going to try and reflect some of that in the new resources that we develop as time goes on. So the last slide just gives you the Growing Good website address where you can sign up for free to access the 6 toolkit sessions, the training hub, the 3 new films, the prayer resource that Tim mentioned, and some other resources on there as well. And if you do want a conversation with me about using the Growing Good Toolkit, then as I said, I'm very happy to arrange sort of one-to-one sessions. And if you do use the Growing Good Toolkit, or you have already used it, then please do let us know what you thought of it. And if you've got any specific feedback or suggestions for improving it, or if you want to share any stories of how it's helped your church or your group, you can again email me, or we do have a short feedback survey on the Growing Good website. So I think we can now take some questions, and they can be questions for me, or hopefully Eleanor or Tim are also happy to answer any questions, or Claire or Caroline if it's to do with the diocese and the parish support work that Claire's engaged with. Claire, do we have any questions in the chat?
I'll just have a look. I didn't see any new things coming through. No, just the questions in the chat at the moment. So if you know how to use your little yellow hand, please feel free to use that little symbol, or do waving, because I can see everybody in the room.
So I can see there is a question about, are the session film clips available to download? Yes, they are. So when you've logged in, you'll see the session film embedded on the session page, and underneath there's a little link to a download. So you can, yes, download the films to watch or to share if you don't have internet access where you're going to run the group. Any other questions? Jim?
I'm a church warden and reader for a church on a social housing estate in what we call a Magnificat parish. And in line with our deanery deployment plan, we're hoping later this year to appoint a lay pioneer minister to work on that estate and help us to reconnect. And I've been considering using the Growing Good course to maybe mobilize church volunteers, so that when that pioneer's appointment is in place, we don't end up telling them how to do the job, but we have a common language to think about how we start building relationships with the communities on the 2 social housing estates. Is that the sort of thing that it's been used for in the past, or suitable for?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, to me, that sounds a bit like mission action planning or similar. The only thing I would say is that I wonder whether you would wait until that person is in post and that they would be part of that group, because I think then everyone would be developing a shared understanding together, and it would be a great, because some of the toolkit activities are about getting to know the community. So the present session includes a mapping exercise where you get a big map of the area or the parish, and you map on it where congregation members live, significant places and buildings. And that would be for that person, if they don't know the area, that would be a great exercise for them to engage with the group. But yeah, I think it would be a great resource for that person and for the church as they start.
So what I'm looking to do is to try and raise the interest and anticipation of that appointment, so that
Right.
the person doesn't turn up on day one and find out they're a lone ranger.
Right.
The parish.
Yes, I mean, yes, certainly it would work to kind of get people in that mindset. Yeah.
And maybe just do a more light touch. And then, yes, I don't want to anticipate what the pioneer minister will want to do, but
No.
to make sure there are people alongside that person to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jim, we can always have a chat, because there's part of my role I look after as well as Magnificat, the Bath Archdeaconry. So one of my other colleagues, Rob's in the room as well. So if you would like to have a conversation about that,
that would be helpful. I think it's important that we are prepared,
so that we've got some joined up, as Polly says, some joined up thinking. That would be absolutely brilliant. It's great you're keen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other thoughts or reflections, questions?
Just to say that, so Eleanor talked about her group kind of developing an action plan. We heard quite early on from churches that use the toolkit that they were often generating 3-4 pages of ideas towards the end of the 6 sessions. So actually we've adapted the next step session to include some documents and some tools to help churches filter through their ideas and decide on which they're going to take forward, and think about how they're going to present their ideas to the church leadership or the PCC or the wider congregation, how they're going to start to put some plans behind the ideas as well. So yeah, if you're interested in those kind of next steps, the next step session kind of already has some of that material there for you.
Any other comments? Polly, anything else you want to add before we?
I don't think so. I mean, as I said, I'm very happy to hear from people by email or to have phone calls, video chats, or to hear via Claire if anyone's got any questions or any feedback. We can take that afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Anne, you're waving. I can see you waving.
Yeah, I'm just waving. We run a small Bible study group in the local pub, and it includes people who are not yet Christians, who are inquirers, and because the context is low-key and not religious, so it's been quite a lovely intersection. That, do you think this would be an appropriate course to suggest to the minister?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think, as Eleanor said, it's quite practically focused. It's and it gives people a opportunity to talk about their experience. So it's not necessarily drawing on any previous knowledge. You don't have to be kind of particularly theologically, biblically literate or knowledgeable. It's often about people's own experiences. So yeah, I think it would work well.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great idea.
Thank you. Can't see any more waving hands. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along and being with us and participating and engaging with this this evening. I'd like to thank Polly for an amazing presentation, for your enthusiasm and inspiring us all. Thank you so much. And also to Tim and Eleanor for your inspiration and thoughts on how to take the Growing Good toolkit forward. It's really, really helpful to have people from Bath and Wells in the room who've used it and can share their experiences. So that's really lovely. And also want to say thank you to Caroline, brilliant co-hosting over there. I can see you. So I think we will follow up with an email. We have recorded the session because some people we'll do a bit of editing because we just let it run. So there'll be long pauses and things like that. So where you've been in the breakout room, so we'll take that out. And as Polly said, please do be in touch if we can help further. Shall we have a moment of quiet, and we'll finish with a prayer. From where we are to where you need us, Christ be beside us. From what we are to what you can make of us, Christ be before us. From the mouthing of generalities to making signs of your kingdom, Christ be beneath us. Through the streets of this world to the gates of heaven, Christ be above us. Surround us with your presence. Inspire us with your purpose. Confirm us in your love. Amen. God bless.